Hey, how's it going, everyone? Thank you for joining me on another episode of the Music Reviewer Podcast. My name's Josh, and I'm the music reviewer. Today, we are going over the latest album by the band Hinds, titled "The Prettiest Curse." Hinds being the band from Spain. So, yeah, let's get into this album review. Before we cover that album today, I just want to let everyone know the last episode I put out actually was a best and worst track of the week. Something a little bit different. I don't know if I'm going to keep doing it, but for now, I'll just be doing it weekly. It's going to be a video. I'm sorry, it's going to be a podcast over the tracks that enter the Hot 100, and I'll pick two songs from that week. One that's the best and one that's the worst. Just something fun for me to do, just so it's not so serious over the album reviews. If you want to check that out, go ahead and check it out. Yeah, thanks for listening. Let's get started on this review. Not familiar with the band Hinds, or you're just never really heard of them, I'll try to introduce them as simple as possible. They're an all-female Spanish indie rock band, which up until now their sound has had hints of garage rock and surf rock. Um, they're pretty lo-fi sounding rock music, a little rough around the edges, and we'll get into this all because it's vital to the review. Um, Overall, they're probably just about the smallest band I've covered. Probably a tie between them and Hazel English, but Heinz is probably a little bit smaller, especially if you live in the United States. You're probably more likely to have heard of them if you live in Europe. Now, this band caught traction with a couple demo tracks in 2014. They did form in 2011, though, originally as a duo. Later, they did add a bassist and a drummer. Around the time they actually started getting traction, um, and thus far they've released three albums. With their previous effort in 2018 titled "I Don't Run." That album in particular was a pretty lo-fi sounding album, aesthetically as well. I think it was done purposely, um, where much of the vocals in that album sounded a little rough around the edges, a little unrefined, and same with some of the instrumentals as well. Um, Now, not to say that that album was terrible, because usually those are elements of maybe something that sounds not so good. This album, or that album in 2018, did have um, a level of charm and sincerity to it, where the performances did have lots of energy and charisma on the album, and I think that's why Hines has caught so much people's attention so far. It's not really because of their technicality or their virtuosity. It's mainly because it's these four girls just having fun in a band playing and creating a product or I won't say product, but just creating a sound and form of music that is quite unique. Actually, there's not really many bands that sound like Hinds nowadays, even though they're part of this indie rock scene. Um, and I feel like that's something pretty valiant in today's music scene, when you can find your little corner and say, "This is yours." It doesn't really sound like anything else. When you put on Hinds, I immediately know who Hinds is, just because of those two vocalists with the wailing vocals. And there are obvious, I guess, accents in the vocals as well, because they are a Spanish rock band, but they do sing in English, and the accent does bleed through. But it's just a part of their sound. It's what makes the music, in my opinion, uh, unique. So where does a band like Hinds go after releasing two albums and finally getting some traction? Um, well, it seems like they went more of the route of producing something that is refined, more accessible and poppy, and that does work. Uh, that was the case with Hazel English's latest album, and I felt like it did work more in her favor. This is a little bit different of a situation. Prettiest Curse is, like I'm saying, it's more thought out. Many of the songs sound radio friendly, and they're lot more poppy than their previous work. If their previous work was really poppy at all, most songs on this album have this anthem-like charm to it, and they're catchy. They'll stay in your head. I think even overall, one of the band members, I think, uh, dropped being a guitarist and switched to being mainly being a keyboardist on this album cycle. So take that with what you will. They're probably this album probably wasn't meant to sound as rocky, so that's basically what we got. So yeah, they did lose a little of their post-punk edginess and roughness. They still kept their charm while executing this new sound, which is essential to this band. Because I feel like if they didn't have their charm, they probably wouldn't be uh, drawing much attention. The technicality and I guess on their instruments has improved on this album. I'm not sure how long they've been playing, but on the last two albums, I can't imagine it's very long for some of the musicians. But things like technicality shouldn't really be uh, too important to the sound or like a band like Hinds. What really matters is how they implement their choices, how the songs are thought out and I guess executed to whatever they want to do. And it ends up being a pretty decent album, actually, starting with the song Good Bad Times. This one is probably one of the first songs I heard for this album cycle. It was released as a single. It starts off with a nice syncopated punchy bass line. There's some fun guitar lines mixed in lightly. There's a very catchy chorus into this. A nice smooth texture in the vocals. The pre-chorus energy is quite nice too as well. There's an attitude to it. And this one is a hooky, earwormy song. I liked it as soon as I heard it, and I like this direction a little bit more. And this direction is really what is the case for the next couple songs on this album, especially on the third song, "Riding Solo." This one's one of my favorites as well. I think this one has been released for a while as a single too, because I think I've heard it some time ago too. And this one, it's good because there's some nice pacing in the verse. It has some quirky little synth embellishments, nice little rhythmic ideas in the verse as well with the vocal part, and the chorus pays off. It's anthem like, so once it hits, you're glad you stuck around to that part of the song. There's nice use of effects in the song that give it character, like with the percussive transitions to the second chorus. The song does build up to the end, making an extended chorus. It makes it even more earwormy. They keep that part "I've been riding solo," the main point of the song, and yeah, it's another radio-friendly type song on this album. Next song I'd like to talk about is the one immediately after that called Boy. It has a nice upbeat tempo. The chorus is colorful. It has nice melodic guitar lines, convincing vocals, fun shouts in the background. It's a song about not being able to get a boy out of their head, so it's a little romantic. There's a nice developed build up in the last chorus with a counter melody from the bridge. Um, has a hint of Spanish pop music from the 2000s. I think that's another highlight on this album. I don't know if that's what they drew from, but to me, it was nice. It made me a little nostalgic because that music's kind of dead. And what I really mean is like the top 40 for Latin music. Um, Artists like Paulina Rubio, stuff like that. I'm not, if that rings a bell. But yeah, um, nice track on the song "Boy." The song right after that, "Come Back and Love Me," is probably one of the most unique Hinds songs I've heard to date. It has like a lovely classical guitar intro. It was played very well. It paints a colorful image with these vocals and bass accompaniment together. It's tango-like. I think it's bossa nova um, on the genre. Has an earwormy hook in the chorus with lovely harmonies. It's soft but hearable. There's multiple vocalists in the lead melody as well, which I'll stop right there. Actually, that's how the most case for Hinds songs. They either sing in unison with two vocalists or they are taking turns on the verses. So the vocalists are very similar, but they are distinguishable. So, but yeah, the song doesn't have much of a build up in it, but it still survives a listen with the execution of the ideas and nice little embellishments that are added towards the end. Yeah, it's a little bit of a sappy song. It sounds kind of like heartbreaky, but it's executed well, and it's probably one of my favorite Hinds songs till date. Um, the next song that I like to point out happens later in the album, towards the end, Waiting for You. This track is more reminiscent of the Spanish pop of the 2000s as well. It has a nice build up in the verse, nice transition to the chorus. It has a kind of chant like chorus as well. The harmonies are distinct but slightly lifeless. There's a typical guitar lines and tones expected in a Hinds song in the song, and it aims to be emotional. Maybe misses execution. Um, yeah, it's probably one of their more formulaic songs, very poppy. It sounds like it possibly written for another artist. So that's probably a criticism I have overall for this album, highlighted in the song Waiting for You. Um, some of these tracks, yes, they did opt out for a more poppy sound, and some of it is executed quite well. However, some of it kind of is obviously too poppy or maybe produced songs that I'm not convinced maybe that Hinds wrote it or that they wrote it with you know as much excitement and sincerity as songs in the past, and that kind of happens in other tracks. Say maybe Take Me Back is one of them, and not that this one is super accessible and poppy, but that one is really just one dimensional with this guitar line being played with this one effect in the overall track, and it just engulfs the whole entire song. There's not much lyrical content to it. Um, it's I thought it sounded quite nice, but one could probably think that something like this is maybe filler. But yeah, and the album does pick itself up to the very end. This Moment Forever is probably another unique songs, one of the more unique songs in the Hinds catalog. Uh, this one is a slow song. It's a slow burner, a little bit, and it's over this compound time signature. These It has these nice sensitive accompanimental parts that are used. The vocals are performed nicely and has these harmonies fitting nicely together. It actually ends up being a powerful vocal performance on the album. Has a somber feeling and tone to it. These dueling melodies in the chorus that create a nice effect. And I was actually really impressed with that song. It made me like the album even more because it showed versatility and it made me excited for what Hinds could possibly be doing next. And overall, yeah, this album ended being quite positive for me. I feel it's probably around a 7 out of 10. So, yeah, I don't know why I was hesitant to cover this album. Maybe because the first time I listened to it, it maybe didn't catch me, but once I really sat down and started making notes on it, I kind of saw what was happening, and I think they made a right decision in going this direction. It kind of sucks that right now with the whole COVID-19 thing, they can't really tour this album and promote it as much. So hopefully they don't fall by the wayside and people don't forget about them. But yeah, check this album out. I was impressed with it. If you like indie rock, if you're a fan of bands like I guess The Strokes, you might end up finding something you like in this album. So, yeah, thanks for listening to this point on the review. I'm the music reviewer, and we'll be reviewing some more music soon. See you later.